two households, both alike in dignity. In fair Equestria, we lay our scene. From an ancient grudge that break new mutiny, where civil blood makes... Are you going to talk like that the whole time? I am merely setting the stage for the retelling of the classic literature and... No, you're not. Objection! So yes, today we'll be taking a look at the latest release of the MLP Classics Reimagined with Romeo and Juliet. And like the previous installments, it satirizes the original literature, varying the characters from the MLP roster to fill in various roles. And today we have Cheese Sandwich and Pinkie Pie as the two star-crossed lovers. Though, unlike the other comics, which had 4 issues spanning their abridged parody, this is a single, standard-length, one-shot. Which is kind of to the comic's detriment, as while the story does cover the critical scenes, it still leaves a lot to be desired. But we'll come back to that later. First things first, we'll discuss the artwork. Once again, we have Jenna Ayub and Heather Breckle, and I will say that the visuals have improved in some aspects, such as with the ponies' faces being more diverse and expressive, conveying emotions better. The non-pony species actually look really good as well, especially Ember, whose overall design flow is rather elegant. The colors don't feel as muted as before, and it feels like the characters and backgrounds have much more depth to them. With that being said though, despite the facial expressions improved in some areas, the characters still suffer from the same design flaws as before. While Cheese Sandwich looks decent, due to most stallions having an elongated muzzle, the mares on the other hoof just look off. Whether from the side or the front, the muzzles look squished to the point where their faces are almost completely flat at times, with tiny noses. And as I've said before, their body-to-head ratio sometimes makes them look like bowling pins. Also, something else I noticed, and it's also kind of hard to describe, but at times their eyes just feel...
lifeless eyes, like a doll's eyes.
Okay, enough about the visuals, let's get to the story actual now. The overall plot concerns the two families who are now portrayed as rival party planning companies that want to throw an impressive party that will get the attention of Princess Cadence to be chosen to throw a bash for Flurry Heart's first birthday, and essentially be crowned as the most esteemed party company in Equestria, or at least between the two rival companies. And when I mentioned this is the most hyper-abridged of the Classics Reimagined, I meant it. After the opening prologue, we immediately jump to the party where the two lovers were destined to meet. Then there's the big fight between the Capulets and the Montagues, and the church where we see their quote-unquote deaths. But we'll come back to that later. Now, the original novel is about this romance that defines all odds. Two young lovers whose relationship transcends generations, with rival families fighting with guns, driving in cars, and... wait.
Do you bite your thumb at us, sir?
No, sir, I do not bite my thumb at you, sir, but I bite my thumb, sir!
Sorry, I got off track. But yeah, the love between the two in the original novel was completely one-dimensional and is nothing more than superficial, loving each other simply for their beautiful looks alone. Of course, there are other story elements that make the tale seem more artificial, but we're here to talk about pony comics. Now, being that we're utilizing fleshed-out characters from MLP and adapting them to these essentially one-dimensional characters, the love story does feel comparatively improved. Whereas the original's relationship is solely based on their looks and focused on only each other, the comic uses the striking beauty element as a stepping-off point, but we do see Cheese and Pinkie, two expert party planners, actually discuss goals and aspirations that can not only benefit each other, but their families as well, and potentially bring them together as one strong, unified family. And while the conversations aren't particularly deep, you still feel a legit connection between the characters and it works great. As far as the rest of the family members go, like the novel, they all hate each other from the beginning, but do actually come together in the end, feeling like a rushed but still better conclusion, resolving the feud between the two families. By the way, let's check out the families. The Capulets are the main 6, while the Montagues are Cheese, Starlight, Trixie, Sunburst, Capper, and Ember. Ember, by the way, doesn't even get a single line of dialogue, and just reacts to stuff in the background. which is fine as to not direct attention from the main plot, but why include a character who has no significant impact or any words to contribute? Also, side note, in the original novel, Mercutio repeatedly refers to Tybalt as the Prince of Cats, and Tybalt was a Capulet, yet you have Capper, who is a cat, who is a Montague. Okay, I admit this doesn't really affect the plot whatsoever, but all you had to do was just switch the family names and you would have had something really clever. But no, this is just me being an over-obsessed nerd pointing that out. Okay, so the comic hits the main points of the original novel, so what's the main problem that holds the comic back from its full potential? Well, lack of comedy. The comic is supposed to satirize an old romance novel, and despite some zaniness that happens here and there was a surprising lack of humor, especially when you have Pinky and Cheese Sandwich as the headliners. Maybe if the comic was at least 2 issues, then we could have developed the characters and the story a little more, and have more room to poke fun at the original story elements. And yes, we do kind of get that with other elements, such as with Spike and Discord. Spike is our narrator abridging the various story events, all the while questioning the off-color language of the original's writing. And he kind of becomes his own character as we see him at war with Shakespeare's writing. The commentary can be a little funny, but at the same time it does kind of distract from the story. As for Discord, his role is to basically get the story back to its more darker, grittier conclusion with both dying to poison. And eventually, the two lovers have no choice with their backs to the wall and their family's hatred bearing down on them, and thus we come to death of creativity. Yep, the two lovers resigned to have a boring, unimaginative party setting, literally taking the creativity out of the equation to prevent any further fighting between the two, with both companies losing their primary party ponies. Again, it's kind of funny, but despite the fantasy setting and characters from MLP involved, the story for the most part kind of plays it straight, which does improve the story elements of the original, but I could have used a little more humor here and there. Again, I mostly just attribute that issue to being a one-shot. In the end, MLP Classics Reimagined Romeo and Juliet was okay. There's nothing really bad about the comic, the artwork is improved somewhat, and the story hits the main points of the original tale, but again, the lack of humor affected my overall enjoyment of the comic. But let me know what you guys thought about it in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe. Well, that's it for today, guys. Until next time, MC out!